My friends, today I want to share with you a powerful truth that will transform the way you see the challenges in your relationships. There are moments in life when God steps in, not with loud announcements, not with flashing signs, but with divine wisdom and unseen hands, protecting you from people who are not meant to be in your destiny. You may not recognize it at first. You may even resist it. But when God is shielding you from toxic people, it is because He sees what you cannot see and knows what you do not know. Sometimes you will notice that certain people begin to distance themselves from you without any explanation. You may feel abandoned, hurt, or confused. But what you see as rejection is actually divine protection. God will remove those who do not honor your purpose, those who seek to drain your energy and contaminate your spirit. He is creating space for the right people to come into your life, people who will build you up, not tear you down. Then there are times when the doors to unhealthy relationships suddenly close. You prayed for clarity and God answered, but not in the way you expected. The opportunities that once seemed promising begin to crumble. The conversations that once brought excitement turn into burdens. And just when you wonder why everything is falling apart, God whispers, I am saving you from what you cannot see. You may not understand now, but later you will thank Him for the closed doors. Pay attention when your spirit feels uneasy around certain people. That is not paranoia, that is discernment. When God is protecting you, He will give you warnings in your heart. He will stir something inside you. A gentle nudge, a strong conviction, a deep discomfort that you cannot ignore. Do not silence the voice of wisdom. Do not overlook the inner alarms. Toxic people will disguise themselves with charm, with sweet words, with promises, but God will give you discernment to see beyond the surface. There are moments in life when certain people walk away from us, relationships come to an abrupt end, and connections we once valued suddenly dissolve without explanation. It can be painful, confusing, and even heartbreaking. We question what went wrong, wondering if we could have done something differently. What we often fail to see in the moment is that these separations are not just coincidences. They are divine interventions. God sees beyond what we can see. He knows the hearts of people, their true intentions, and the impact they have on our destiny. When He allows someone to leave, it is not to hurt us, but to protect us. Many times we hold on to relationships that are draining our energy and limiting our potential. We stay connected to people who manipulate, deceive, or misuse us, not realizing how much they are affecting our peace and purpose. We justify their actions, make excuses for their behavior, and convince ourselves that they belong in our lives. But God, in His wisdom, knows when it is time for a separation. He knows when a person is preventing us from growing into the person He created us to be. And because He loves us, He steps in and removes what we are too afraid to let go of. It does not always happen in a dramatic way. Sometimes the change is subtle. Conversations that once felt effortless become strained. The connection that once brought joy begins to feel burdensome. Small misunderstandings turn into recurring conflicts. And despite your best efforts, the relationship no longer feels the same. This is often God's way of revealing that the season has shifted. He allows the distance to grow, not to create pain, but to make room for something better. When someone is not meant to walk with you into your next season, He will cause circumstances to change so that their presence no longer fits where He is taking you. Other times, a separation is abrupt. Without warning, a friend stops calling, a relationship ends, or a person you trusted turns away from you. It feels like betrayal, like rejection, like abandonment. But what seems like a painful loss is actually divine protection. You may not see the hidden motives, the unspoken words, or the unseen dangers that God is shielding you from. He removes people who would have led you down the wrong path. He closes doors that would have distracted you from your purpose. He blocks relationships that would have drained you emotionally and spiritually. What feels like rejection is actually grace in disguise. We must learn to trust that when God allows a separation, it is always for our good. It may not make sense in the moment, but in time we will understand why it had to happen. We will look back and see how that person's absence brought us peace, how that door closing led us to something greater, and how that painful goodbye was actually the beginning of a new season of growth. God is intentional in his actions. He does not remove without purpose. He does not separate without a greater plan. And when he takes something away, it is because he is making space for something that aligns with his will for our lives. There are moments in life when we stand before doors that we believe should open for us. We invest time, energy, and hope into relationships, opportunities, and dreams that seem promising. We pray for things to work out. We push forward with determination, and we expect to see progress. But then, without warning, the door closes. The job offer we were counting on doesn't come through. The friendship we cherish starts to fade. The relationship we believed would last ends unexpectedly. It feels unfair, confusing, and discouraging. We wonder why, after all our effort, things did not work out the way we planned. What we don't often realize is that what looks like rejection is often divine redirection. God sees beyond what we can see. He knows the outcome of every decision before we make it. He understands the hearts of people we trust even when they don't show their true intentions. He sees the dangers ahead, the pitfalls we cannot recognize, and the consequences of choices that seem right to us in the moment. So when he closes a door, it is not to punish us or withhold something good from us. It is to protect us from what we cannot see. What we may perceive as a missed opportunity is in reality divine intervention. Many times we try to force doors open that were never meant for us. We hold on to relationships that no longer align with where God is leading us. We chase after opportunities that would ultimately drain us rather than bless us. We ignore the warning signs and continue to pursue things that are not meant for our destiny. But God, in his wisdom, does what we often do not have the strength to do ourselves. He removes what is not aligned with his plan. He blocks paths that would lead to unnecessary pain. He disrupts our plans so that we don't settle for less than what he has prepared for us. There are times when a door closes suddenly and it catches us off guard. We feel the sting of disappointment and we struggle to understand why things change so quickly. It may feel like everything is falling apart when in reality, things are falling into place. When God removes something, it is because he has something greater ahead. The closed door is a sign that he is making room for something that will serve a higher purpose in our lives. Other times, the process is slow. The opportunity that once excited us begins to feel heavy. The relationship that once brought joy becomes a source of stress. The doors don't slam shut immediately, but little by little, they stop opening. That is often God's way of gently guiding us away from something that is no longer meant for us. He allows circumstances to shift so that we can recognize that it is time to move forward. It is not rejection, it is redirection. When we face closed doors, our natural response is often to ask why. We wonder if we did something wrong or if we missed an opportunity. But rather than questioning the closed door, we should trust that there is a greater purpose behind it. Every no from God is a setup for a better yes. Every time a door does not open, it is because he is guiding us toward one that will. The things that did not work out were never meant to work out. And the things that fell apart were never part of his perfect plan. When we release what was never meant to be, we make space for what is truly meant for us. There are moments in life when something within us feels unsettled. We may be in a relationship, a friendship, or a partnership that seems fine on the surface, yet deep down something feels off. We try to shake the feeling, rationalize it, or push it aside, but no matter how much we try to ignore it, it lingers. That unsettling feeling is not random. It is not paranoia. It is discernment. It is God's way of speaking to us warning us and protecting us from something we do not yet fully understand. God has given every person an internal warning system. It is that deep knowing in our spirit that alerts us when something is not right. It is that moment when a conversation leaves us feeling uneasy, even though nothing obvious was said. It is that tension we feel when we are around certain people, even when they appear kind and welcoming. It is that hesitation in our hearts when making a decision, even when everything looks good on paper. Discernment is God's way of speaking to us beyond logic, beyond what our eyes can see, and beyond what our minds can comprehend. Many times we ignore these warnings because we want to believe the best in people. We do not want to assume that someone has bad intentions. We do not want to walk away from a relationship we have invested time in. We do not want to question the motives of those we trust. But discernment is not about being suspicious. It is about being spiritually aware. When God is protecting us, He will stir something in our spirit that we cannot ignore. That uneasiness is a sign that something is not right, even if we do not yet know what it is. Sometimes discernment comes in the form of small signs. A person may say something that sounds harmless, but it does not sit well in our hearts. We may notice inconsistencies in their words and actions, but we convince ourselves that we are overthinking. We may feel drained after being around certain people, yet we continue to entertain them out of obligation. When God is warning us, He will allow these small moments to capture our attention. He will gently remind us that something is off, but it is up to us to listen. There are also times when discernment comes in stronger ways, a sudden change in behavior, an unexpected revelation, or a situation that exposes someone's true character. What was hidden begins to surface, and what was unclear becomes obvious. In those moments, we realize that the warnings we felt all along were not random. They were God's way of protecting us before we even saw the danger. But if we continue to ignore those warnings, we put ourselves at risk of unnecessary hurt and disappointment. God does not give us discernment to confuse us or to make us fearful. He gives it to us so that we can navigate relationships with wisdom. When something does not feel right, it is important to pause, pray, and seek His guidance. He may not always give immediate answers, but He will confirm what He has been trying to show us, whether through a scripture, a conversation, or a situation that reveals the truth. He will always provide clarity when we ask for it. Ignoring discernment can lead to regrets, but following it leads to peace. When we pay attention to the way our spirit responds to certain people and situations, we align ourselves with God's protection. He will never allow us to be deceived without first sending a warning. He will never allow us to walk into harm without first giving us a sign. The question is not whether God is speaking. The question is whether we are listening. There are times in life when we feel stuck, unable to move forward, unable to grow, and unsure why things are not progressing. We put in effort, we try to build relationships, we invest in certain friendships, and yet, instead of thriving, we find ourselves drained. Instead of peace, we experience frustration. Instead of clarity, we feel confusion. What we often fail to recognize is that some connections are blocking our growth. Some people in our lives are not adding to our purpose, but subtracting from it. There are relationships that do not push us forward, but keep us stagnant. And when God sees that someone is limiting our progress, He will step in and allow that connection to fade, not to harm us, but to release us into the next level of our destiny. Some people enter our lives with good intentions, but they are not meant to stay. They were part of one season, but they cannot go with us into the next. The problem arises when we try to hold on to them longer than we should. We refuse to let go because we are attached, because we feel obligated, because we do not want to be alone. But the longer we cling to what God is trying to remove, the more we delay our own growth. We cannot move forward while carrying people who were never meant to be part of our future. We cannot receive new blessings while holding on to relationships that are no longer bearing fruit. Sometimes the people blocking our growth are not doing it intentionally. They may love us, but they do not push us to be better. They may support us, but they do not challenge us to rise higher. They may be comfortable with where they are, and without realizing it, they keep us in the same place with them. Growth requires discomfort. It requires stepping out of familiar places, embracing new opportunities, and sometimes leaving behind those who are not willing to grow with us. When we refuse to step forward, we find ourselves stuck in cycles of frustration, feeling unfulfilled, and wondering why things are not changing. Other times, the people limiting us are not just passive, they are actively holding us back. There are people who will discourage us from pursuing our dreams, not because they do not believe in us, but because they fear what our growth means for them. There are people who will make us feel guilty for wanting more, who will criticize us when we try to improve, who will remind us of our past to keep us from stepping into our future. Some relationships are built on dependency, and the moment we start to break free, those people will try to pull us back down. But when God has destined us for greater, He will not allow us to stay bound to relationships that keep us small. He will create circumstances that make it impossible to stay where we are. The moment some people leave our lives, we notice a shift. Suddenly we have more clarity. Suddenly we feel lighter. Suddenly the things we struggle to accomplish start falling into place. This is not a coincidence. It is divine alignment. There are people whose presence in our lives creates distraction, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. And when they are removed, we see just how much they were blocking us from stepping into the fullness of our purpose. When a relationship is hindering our growth, God will make it uncomfortable. Conversations will start to feel different. The connection will feel forced. The things that once brought joy will become heavy. This is God's way of letting us know that it is time to move forward. If we ignore the signs, we will find ourselves drained, discouraged, and distant from the life we are meant to live. Growth requires separation. It requires letting go of what is no longer serving us so that we can make room for what is truly meant for us. There are moments in life when we experience a deep sense of relief after a relationship ends, even if we do not fully understand why. There is a weight that lifts, a clarity that returns, and a peace that settles in our spirit. At first, it may feel painful, the loss of a familiar voice, the absence of someone we once trusted, and the sudden change in our daily lives can bring moments of sadness. But as time passes, we begin to notice something powerful. Our mind is clearer, our emotions are lighter, and our heart is no longer burdened by the constant tension that once surrounded us. When toxic people leave our lives, it is often then that we recognize just how much they were affecting us. There were conflicts that drained our energy, conversations that left us feeling confused, and situations that stole our joy. We may not have noticed it in the moment, but once they are gone, we realize just how much peace we had been missing. Their presence created chaos. Their words planted doubt, and their influence pulled us away from the things that truly matter. But when God removes them, He is not just taking someone out of our lives. He is restoring what we lost while they were there. One of the first signs of divine removal is mental clarity. Toxic relationships often cloud our judgment. They make us second guess ourselves, question our worth, and doubt the direction we are going. But when that influence is gone, our perspective shifts. We see things more clearly. We understand situations in ways we never did before. We recognize patterns that we overlooked. The confusion that once filled our minds is replaced by understanding, and we start to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. Another sign is emotional stability. When we are connected to toxic people, our emotions are constantly up and down. One moment we feel hopeful, the next we feel drained. One day we are excited, the next we are discouraged. This instability keeps us in a cycle of frustration, never fully at peace. But when that toxic connection is broken, our emotions begin to stabilize. We no longer feel the weight of unnecessary stress. We no longer carry the burden of walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace in a situation that was never meant to last. We no longer feel controlled by someone else's moods, reactions, or expectations. Instead, we experience the kind of peace that comes from being in alignment with God's will. Then there is the return of joy. When toxic people are present in our lives, joy often fades without us realizing it. We may still laugh, we may still have good moments, but deep down something feels off. There is an underlying tension that never fully goes away. But once they are gone, we begin to feel a sense of freedom. The things that once felt heavy no longer weigh us down. The activities we used to enjoy bring us happiness again. The stress that once consumed us is replaced by a lightness we had forgotten was possible. God's removal of toxic people is never meant to hurt us. It is meant to heal us. He knows what is best for us, even when we do not see it right away. He knows the hidden struggles, the unseen burdens, and the silent battles we fought while keeping those connections alive. And when He steps in to remove what is draining us, it is not just to take something away. It is to give us back everything we lost in the process. He restores our mind, our heart, our emotions, and our ability to move forward without unnecessary weight. When peace returns after a separation, it is confirmation that the removal was divine. There are moments in life when we experience loss, and it feels as though something valuable has been taken from us. A relationship ends, a friendship fades, or a door closes, and we are left wondering why. It is natural to feel the weight of separation, to question whether things could have been different, and to struggle with the emotions that come with change. But what we often fail to realize in the moment is that God never removes without replacing. He never takes something away without the intention of bringing something better. When He allows people to exit our lives, it is because He is preparing to introduce the right people, the right opportunities, and the right connections that align with our purpose. Many times, we try to hold on to what God is removing because we are afraid of the unknown. We have become so accustomed to certain relationships that even when they bring more harm than good, we struggle to let go. We convince ourselves that things will improve, that people will change, and that if we try harder, everything will fall into place. But when God has decided that a connection is no longer meant for us, He will disrupt it. He will allow the discomfort to grow, the misunderstandings to increase, and the separation to become unavoidable. Not because He wants to see us in pain, but because He knows what is ahead. He knows that there is something greater waiting for us, something we cannot receive until we release what is no longer serving us. When a toxic person leaves, there is often a season of adjustment. The absence may feel strange at first. The routines we built around them are suddenly broken, and the space they once occupied feels empty. But in time, we begin to notice something shift. New connections start to form. The right people begin to enter our lives, people who uplift us, encourage us, and help us grow. The friendships that drained us are replaced by relationships that pour into us. The unhealthy attachments we struggle to break are replaced with connections that bring peace. God does not remove to leave us empty. He removes to make room. If our hands are full of what is not meant for us, we cannot receive what is. If we are clinging to relationships that are rooted in manipulation, dysfunction, or selfishness, we cannot embrace relationships that are filled with love, honor, and mutual respect. When we trust God's process, we begin to see the beauty in His timing. We realize that the things we once cried over were only temporary placeholders for the greater things He had planned all along. Sometimes the replacement does not come immediately. There may be a season where we feel like we are standing in the in-between, No longer where we were, but not yet where we are meant to be. This is where faith is required. This is where we must trust that just as God removed what was not for us, He is preparing what is. He is working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, orchestrating divine connections, and setting the stage for what comes next. The waiting season is not punishment, it is preparation. When the right people arrive, it becomes clear why the wrong ones had to leave. The peace that was missing returns. The joy that was buried under stress resurfaces. The clarity that was clouded by confusion is restored. Suddenly we see that what we thought was loss was actually gain. We understand that what we thought was rejection. And we recognize that when God removes, He always replaces with something that not only restores what was lost, but surpasses what we ever imagined possible. When we look back at the moments when God removed certain people from our lives, we begin to see His divine hand at work. What once felt like loss was actually protection. What once seemed like rejection was actually redirection. The doors that closed, the relationships that faded, the disruptions that confused us, all of it was part of His greater plan. God does not remove to harm us. He removes to heal, to restore, and to make room for something better. When He blocks a path, it is because He has a greater destination in mind. When He stirs discomfort, it is because He is calling us to higher places. When He allows people to walk away, it is because they were never meant to stay. Peace is the evidence of His protection. Clarity is the confirmation of His guidance. Growth is the result of His divine alignment. If we trust His process, we will see that every closed door led to an open one. Every removed person made space for the right ones, and every painful goodbye was setting the stage for a greater hello. In the end, we will always realize that God's way was better, His plan was perfect, and His protection never failed us.